guys, it's an incredibly windy day today, so I'm going to shut ourselves into the bike cave and we're going to build this Commencal Meta. And if you are eagle-eyed, you'll probably notice there's actually another one just behind it as well, which we've already built. This one in the box is my one. There's a few little tweaks I'm going to make to it this year, but what I'm going to do primarily here is show you how Commencal package their bike so that when you buy one, because Commencal do a lot of direct-to-market retail in the same mode as a lot of bike companies do these days, but when you take it out of the box, you'll see that there's not an awful lot that you actually need to do to get it ready to ride. First things first, before we get started, we're going to want a few bits and bobs. So you're going to need Allen keys, you're going to need Torx keys, you're going to want a pump, obviously, and you're probably going to want a set of pedals because the bike doesn't come with pedals. But generally speaking, getting it unboxed is pretty simple, as you're going to see. So you've just got to have your workspace ready to go, and obviously the most important thing you need to have is lubricant. If you don't have lubricant, things will dry up and seize and generally become less functional than they want to be. Too much lubricant though, and you do still get the same problem. Right, okay, so let's have a quick look at what's in this box. So if you just come with me a second, as you can see, inside the packaging here we have the bike itself with the stem already on, handlebars turned to the side, the fork is on. Handlebars are in this packet here. You've got your front wheel over at this side, seat is already in the bike, and the back end of the bike is all assembled. So all you need to do is take out your excess bits of packaging, which are simply in there to protect the bike. The wheel itself will just lift out from the side there as well, like so. We'll set our wheel aside over here. And then it's a case of just pulling this bad boy out and getting some packaging off it. So as you can see, once it's out of the box, it's actually pretty straightforward. So we've got a bit of packaging on here, which we're going to get taken off. And the bike is, as you can see, fairly complete here really. So it's not really that big a task. So let's just crack on with getting this packaging off, shall we? Within the box, basically the bike is pretty much complete, but there's a few things which aren't attached, and there's a few things which are actually attached to the bike, which you're going to want as you go as well. So obviously the front wheel comes separate to the bike, but obviously this is just a case of bolting it in with the axle. However, the other thing you get here as well are you get some RockShox goodies in here as well, including volume spacers as well, so you can get that fork dialed in nicely. There is a little handlebar hanger that Commencal have attached to the bike as well, and you've also got a couple of pedal spacers here as well. Those are pedal axle washers, which obviously sit behind your pedals where your crank is going to be protected by the washers, so as you screw those in, you're not going to damage the crank. There's also a box of bits just here as well. Now, let's just open this up and show you what is inside it, if I can indeed find my knife. Which I can't, so I should just tear it open with my bare hands because I'm that kind of a monster. Right, so inside here, there are KS seat post instructions. There is that tool, which is actually for setting the spacing of your cable on the bottom of your dropper post. So it's quite a useful tool, don't lose that one. Lots of people think that's a piece of random packaging and chuck it away. It's not. There are lights, there is a bulb, there are tubeless valve cores as well. Now, the bike doesn't come set up tubeless, but it does come with a set of valve cores. I'm not actually going to be using these ones because I've got some jazzy red ones because I'm a bit of a pimp like that. I like to have my bike colour coded. So, like I say, no pedals. So you're going to need your own set of pedals, which we'll move on to in a minute. And basically, I'm now going to build this up. There isn't an awful lot to do, so I'm going to turn that stem round, fit those bars, put the front wheel in. Now, if you need your brakes UK style rather than Euro style, then what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to switch the brake levers over. Now on these Avids it's actually dead easy because the Avids are, the levers are actually the same design both sides. You can see it's got the same graphics on the back and the front, so you can just take them over, take them off and swap them straight over. There's no issues with doing that at all, it's dead easy. If your brake has come with Shimano brakes, which personally I would actually prefer to have because I love Shimano brakes, but we'll see what these codes are like this year. If you've got Shimano brakes, you won't be able to do that, because if you do that with Shimano brakes, what will happen is the reservoir for the brake hose will end up sitting, instead of on top of the lever, which is what Shimano's have, it'll end up underneath the bars, and you can't run them like that, they don't work. So you'll actually have to swap your hoses over if you've got Shimano's. Now, if you are very careful and you get a mate to help you, and you keep the hoses nice and upright, and you keep the tips of the levers at the top of everything so that there's no sort of back pressure in the system, you can quite often get away with switching Shimano hoses over without having to do a bleed. But it's tricky. But I've got away with it several times over the years. So anyway, I'm going to swap these brake levers over. I'm then going to fit the dropper lever to the matchmaker clamp here on the handlebars. KS, in their great wisdom, KS use this teeny tiny little screw on this dropper post remote, and they're incredibly fiddly to put on, so you'll probably see me struggling with that for a while. But once I've done that, the cockpit is basically assembled. As you can see, we've got the front wheel in. When you take the front wheel to put it in, don't forget there's a brake spacer in the front brake. So you also want to take that out before you stick your front wheel in. Keep these, they're brilliant. If you fly with your bike, like a lot of us do a lot of the time, that's exactly what you need to stick in your bike to fly with it, so that your brakes don't get compressed whilst it's packaged up in your bike bag. So yeah, be aware of that, don't chuck it away, keep it, useful stuff. Right, let's get on with swapping these brakes over. What you need to bear in mind are a couple of things. On the bar, as you can see right here, there are gradient markings, which make it nice and easy for you to set your levers up in the right position. We'll do this more fully on the floor once we're finished, because obviously once it's in the stand you can't get your angles right and stuff terribly easily. Plus there's a bit of experimentation because new bike to me, so I don't know about this bar shape or this lever shape. I'm actually going to be swapping my bars out anyway, but I'll do that later. One other thing you need to bear in mind on the front end of this bike is the stem. Now, you can see that this is a Commencal Alpha stem, and if you look carefully on the side here, there is a little sign that says 0 gap. Now, what you do is you need to tighten up the top bolts first and get those so that the gap is closed, and then you start tightening your stem bolts as per normal, but you should make sure that there isn't a gap in that sort of joint here, otherwise it's not assembled properly. In many ways that actually makes it simpler than some other brands where you've got 4 bolts and you're trying to balance the distance between all 4 of them kind of equally. At least if you know you're doing all your top bolts up first, that's going to be a much simpler assembly. A few race face stems do that as well, I think, but the Commencal ones are actually very well designed. Their own brand kit is actually really quite nice. I'm only changing out the bar because I fancied a treat. Right, so let's continue. I'm going to sort of carry on with a bit of assembly of some pedals next, I think. And then we're almost there. As you can see, it's not terribly complicated. As you probably just saw, I've quickly changed my preferred chainring and pedals onto the bike. I go for a smaller chainring, so I run a 30-tooth chainring, and the reason I do that is because in Andorra we've got some pretty steep climbs, and I find a 32 really just doesn't give you what you need for the steep stuff. I also run Crank Brothers stamps. They've seen better days, but they're still running really well. I mean, basically this chainring and this pedal, well, in fact both pedals, have done over 3,000 kilometers last season alone. And to be honest with you, these are still running smooth. The pins are, could probably do with a replacement soon, but I've not lost or damaged a single pin. And the chainring itself, although I've taken the anodizing off it, if you look at it, it's still in really, really good shape. So whenever anyone sort of says to you, oh, SRAM stuff doesn't wear very well, it's absolute tosh, quite frankly. My SRAM drivetrain last year, I measured it at the end of the season just before I had to return the bike to Commencal. As I say, I'd done 3,000k on it. I measured it with the chain wear gauge, and on the chain wear gauge, literally, here is the chain wear gauge. On the chain wear gauge, well, in fact, it's still in its position from when I did it. 0 wear, literally no wear whatsoever after 3,000 kilometers. Not a single broken chain. Everything was working as you'd expect it to. So SRAM stuff wears really, really, really well, especially, and I've read up on this a little bit as well, if you read on the internet, a lot of people do say that Eagle in particular wears much slower than a lot of standard drivetrains. I don't know why that is, but yeah, when it went back it was in tip-top nick. So anyway, so last year's pedals and chainring have gone back on. I am actually going to quickly do my my snazzy bar and cockpit upgrade. So I'll get onto that one next. Upgrades complete. We've got some Brendan Fairclough death grips here, which I kind of liked because the weird funky pattern on those goes with the weird funky pattern on the top tube. And again, makes my bike much easier to spot when it's lying down amongst a pile of everyone's bikes. And we've stuck a Renthal fat bar on there, and a Renthal stem, same length as the one that came off it, slight more rise to the one that came compared to the one that came off it. However, I'm running a longer sweep back on the bar, which should give me overall roughly the same riding position actually. This is a wider bar, which means that ultimately the sweep will take me back into roughly the right riding position and up into roughly the right riding position, similar to the Commencal kit that has just come off and is now sat over here and won't see that bike again until it gets sent back to Andorra in about a year's time. Right, so that's the cockpit done. Looks pretty cool actually, I quite like that. And like I say, makes my bike a bit easier to spot amongst the crowd. So one more upgrade to go, and then we can just get this out the stand and finish it off. Shiny new mech fitted, and I changed this for no other reason apart from the fact that I kind of like the idea of having a red and white mech to match my red and white bike. I know, a bit vain. Actually, that's not entirely true. We do occasionally, as guides, because there's a lot of us riding and we've all got basically the same bike, destroy a rear mech. And last year we destroyed a rear mech and couldn't get one very easily because the shop unfortunately had just sold out because it was just after the World Cup. So this year what I'm doing is I'm generating a spare rear mech for our guides by buying myself a rear mech. Hopefully it won't get used, gives me an excuse to buy a little bit of extra chintziness, and I accidentally seem to have fitted it with a matching red cable end there as well, so that's that changed. We've done the drivetrain, we've got the bars installed, as you know, so now it's time to pull it off the work stand and make a few final adjustments, and then I think we're pretty much done. Obviously I've fitted a new rear mech, but it was shifting perfectly before I stuck that new mech on it. If you are adjusting a SRAM rear mech, just whilst we're on that subject, you want to get yourself one of these tools. And what that does is it sits up underneath the sprockets and it actually measures the gap between the top of the jockey wheel and the bottom of the sprockets. And that's the way that you get a SRAM rear mech set up. There's lots of information about that online, but you can't do it without it. Well, you could, but it'd be a lot more faff. With one of those tools, you literally just stick the tool in the gap and adjust your tension adjustment screw, and it's done in seconds. So it's all shifting exactly as it should be. There's no weird noises going on. I've set my new limit screws up with the new mech as well, and it's all shifting as expected. So I'm going to give it a final check through. And I'll also do my suspension settings in a minute as well, but I'm not going to take you through that today because that's probably something for another video. But that's basically our bike assembled. So there we go, one fully built bike. I've had to come inside to show you this. I was going to show you outside, but the storm's got so bad that it's so black outside and so windy you wouldn't even be able to hear me anyway. So just a quick run through of the spec. As you know, I just changed my my bar package to a Renthal Fat Bar Carbon because I had this Renthal stem kicking around from a couple of years ago. Got a Blingy Hope top cap in there to offset the red too, and I'm running these Brendog Death Grips, which I think are pretty cool because they match the top tube. The Meta AM29 has the same frame throughout the range. It doesn't matter which model you buy, you will get the same basic frame, but it's what's hanging off it that's different, obviously, from model to model. So let's quickly go through the spec. Now, key things to talk about first off are you've got a RockShox Lyric Ultimate up the front here, which is their absolute top of the range fork, which I think is going to be beautiful. I'm really looking forward to setting this thing up. It's got a separate low and high speed compression adjustable up here. Literally top of the range single crown fork that RockShox make, and that's matched to the Super Deluxe Ultimate rear shock. Personally, I love air shocks. I don't know why people get so obsessed about coil, because I think air these days performs so well, and if you're trying to ride up as well as descending, I think air's where it's at still. I'm sorry. I descend tens of thousands of meters every year, and I've never been let down by the performance of an air shock. Certainly not a good quality piggyback one like that. So going top to bottom then, we have a fabric seat. Never run one of those, so we'll see how we get on with it. It's colour coded into the bike as well. We have a KS Lev Integra seat post. Not the biggest fan of KS seat posts. They've redesigned their lever a little bit this year, which is possibly a good thing. I'm hoping it's going to prove a little bit more reliable. I find that they're super service heavy. I find I get through a cable a month on them, but they're good when they work, but they just seem to need a lot of fiddling with to keep them happy. You then have the wheel set is a Spank wheel set. You've got a Spank 359 rear rim matched to a Spank 350 at the front, and it's actually a full Spank wheel package. It's not just the rims, they are actually Spank wheels. As you can see, it's a Boost rear end on this bike. Now the 359 is interesting. So basically, you've got a lower profile on the front rim. I mean, these are quite decent chunky rims that will give you a nice shaped tyre. They're about 30mm internal, I think. But the 350 is shallower vertically than the 359, so you get more depth, which apparently gives you more strength. Spank are quite clever with their rims, and I've had fairly good success with Spank stuff in the past, so I'll be interested to see how these run. You've also got a full SRAM GX drivetrain. Now, I've obviously just upgraded my rear mech to a Blingy XO1 just for the sake of making it match the rest of the bike, and also to give me a spare one for the season as well. But yeah, full SRAM 12-speed Eagle. The chain set is a Descendant, which is, yeah, it's a perfectly functional crank, nothing too flashy about it, looks pretty cool. Never had any trouble with it. Then moving forward to the top of the bike, we are on SRAM Code R brakes this year. So the Code is a 4-pot piston. Quite difficult to see that in this light, but yeah, you basically, it's a 4-pot, so lots of power theoretically, which will be good because I generally find SRAM brakes just a little bit lacking in power sometimes. They just don't bite as much as Shimano's for me, and I find that they have a very soft lever feel, so maybe this will feel a little bit different to what I'm used to, and maybe they'll change my mind, because I quite often end up upgrading my brakes to a Shimano, usually like an XT 4-pot, for example, or Saint. So yeah, SRAM Code R brakes. You've got your GX shift pod up here as well. And the standard Commencal bar is quite a nice one as well. I mean, I've obviously just changed this out, so this is going to be going in the box until it gets sent back to Commencal next year. But you've got a nice stem and bar on there. I just fancied a chance to have a bit of personalisation on my bike. So that's most of your spec, really. I've fitted a Hope seat clamp, just for a bit of extra bling, and also a Hope stem cap. So I've got a few red highlights here and then, which is, like I was saying to you before, mainly about making my bike recognisable when it's in a pile of other similar looking bikes. So that's the main spec. I'm very much looking forward to getting out and riding this. I think that this bike has a lot of potential. It's got some interesting spec differences compared to the one I was riding last year. Had the same, well, a very similar model last year. I was on the Essential Fox last year. Same frame, but hung with Fox components. And personally, I'm not the biggest fan of Fox, so I'm looking forward to getting back onto RockShox. I find that the Fox stuff needs so much looking after, whereas RockShox just performs pretty flawlessly for much, much longer. And I know that that's not the trendiest thing to say, but that's what I'm finding. And obviously I ride a lot of miles. We put our bikes through the ringer, and if something's not going to work, we find out about it very, very quickly. So, thanks for joining me. It's been fun showing you how to unbox and build your Commencal. Admittedly, I've made a few changes whilst I've been here on the way, which obviously have slowed things down a little bit, but I reckon that's taken about an hour to get put together for the average person. It's not very difficult. Everything is basically set up. When I went through and checked the bolts, everything was tight, everything was adjusted correctly, the brakes are adjusted, the gears are adjusted, everything was absolutely bang on. So you really don't need to worry about assembly of these things. It's a doddle. Now, time to hopefully go in, have a beer, wait for morning and see if the sun comes up so we can get out and ride. See you later.